Happy politics, and welcome to What I Know, with great certainty, is your favorite BC Politics podcast / YouTube show. This is BC Poly Hot Stove. I am your amiable host. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca. That's right, I said amiable. And I'm joined in a amiable yet socially distant manner by...
It's the curmudgeonly Jordan Bateman, VP Comms, ICBA. Maclean, I gotta say, this leadership race has been good for us because everyone's calling and lots of people watching and listening, and we've really become your go-to source for BC Liberal leadership news, except on weekends when you and I don't work so much, and then Twitter takes over for us. So lots to talk about this week.
Well, and yeah, we'll start this week with what is not a happy story. News broke, I guess, on Sunday of apparently a very ugly incident that happened, if I have the sequence of events right, on Friday evening in a restaurant and bar in Vancouver. Some Kevin Falcon staffers / volunteers and Diamond Isinger, who BC Poly watchers will recognize as someone who's been involved in politics for, well, almost a decade now, was very famously the person behind the Madam Premier Tumblr account of about, I want to say, 8 years ago, which was shocking in that it cataloged, just simply by reprinting them, sexist comments made about all of Canada's then female premiers, and there was no shortage of material. Anyway, apparently what happened is there were some awful things said to Diamond that night.
She's Mike Lee's, we shall say she's Michael Lee's campaign director.
Sorry. I didn't mean to leave that out. Yeah. She is the campaign director of the Michael Lee for BC Liberal campaign, the BC Liberal leader campaign. Anyway, more to the point, apparently some very awful things were said to Diamond publicly. I don't really want to. They were sexist, and they were awful, and they were misogynistic, and just terrible. This all became public on Sunday. Kevin Falcon initially announced that he was going to appoint Puneet Sandar from his campaign, who is a respected lawyer, to look into this. And that's kind of to look into this and I guess appoint a third party adjudicator, arbitrator. I'm not quite sure. That's kind of where things stand today. One person has been dismissed from Falcon's campaign. There might be more. I don't know. But let's start with, the atmosphere that allowed this to happen. We've talked so many times, Jordan, about the problem that politics has with women. It's not particular to any party or faction. I can tell you from scrolling through comments about Christy Clark on her Facebook page that it's not a right or left-wing phenomenon. It just happens. We just have to do better by women in politics.
Rachel Notley, NDP Premier, faces in Alberta. Annemie Paul, lately of the Greens, faces it. This is disgusting, disheartening, discouraging. I feel terrible for Diamond that she faces this kind of thing anywhere, let alone, with people, who generally support her point of view on most things. It was outrageous. There's no excuse for it at all. And, it's being compounded by, I think, some clumsy handling by the Falcon campaign, and one person has been dismissed from the campaign. Probably should be more. It's so discouraging because I'm married. I have 2 daughters. One's at SFU. She's taking poli sci. Who knows where she ends up going, and she shouldn't have to face this simply because she's a woman. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And you just feel terrible for Diamond, but it's not just Diamond. It's Diamond and Premier Clark and Premier Notley and Annemie Paul and 75 other women. Sonia Savage from Alberta, it seems to be a lightning rod right now. And you just have all of these folks, and it is so disgusting. And I read the comments, and kudos to Diamond for posting them on her Twitter. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I think my understanding from reading Vaughn Palmer this morning is she tried to reach out to the campaign and get this settled sort of behind the scenes. It didn't. So then she went public with it. I wouldn't say these things to my worst enemies. I wouldn't say these things about anyone ever. I just cannot understand the mindset of these men sitting there, and one of them spewing this absolute nonsense and disgusting.
In a public place.
And then, the other two not stepping in, being like, hey, you are way out of line.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be a reckoning on this stuff. And like, I'm not a cancel culture guy, and I'm not like, I don't overreact. This, to me, obviously enough was there that Falcon dismissed one of these people. I think the correct thing to do would have been to stand up in front, on Twitter, on video, or whatever, as Falcon, apologize unreservedly to Diamond Eisinger, then say, I've looked into this. I believe Diamond is telling me the truth. I have fired, and name names, do, and I hope they get the help they need, because clearly they are not the kind of responsible human beings I thought they were, and I should not have put them in a position of authority in my campaign. I'm disgusted that I had to act, my name will ever be attached to them in any way, and I hope, like, see you later. Like, I would have named the names, even if they are volunteers. Like,
yeah.
Like, it's unfathomable to me. I sat there reading. I'm just like, I can't even imagine thinking those things, let alone saying those things, let alone, it's just mind-boggling how cruel people can be and how outrageous and disgusting they can be. And I say, fire them, and anyone who didn't stand up at that table for Diamond and, say, Crowley, you're more, don't be a pretend innocent bystander. You were there. You should have said something and stopped it immediately and punted that guy. And, I can't believe it happened.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to, and I'm not going to be honest, repeat what was said there. But I mean, I will say this, is that we're not talking about stuff that is like kind of arguably across the line. We're not talking about like a heated argument that went too far. These are, you said it best, Jordan, things that you don't even think, much less say in daylight in a public place. It's just, they're so far across the line that any excuse for like, well, it just got out of hand, it just doesn't fly. It's just, these are not things that you can say about anyone, much less somebody who, I mean, it wouldn't matter if Diamond was an avowed political enemy. It wouldn't matter at all.
No.
But we are talking about somebody in the same political party. It's just, it's hard to understand, is I guess the point I'm trying to make. I was flabbergasted when I first read this. I was like, they said what?
Yeah.
And they were where?
Yeah.
Oh, you almost hope alcohol was a significant factor. I mean, even then, it's not an excuse. No. It's just, you mentioned, I want to say one other thing, is that you mentioned kudos to Diamond for posting this, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the tragedy in cases like this is when it happens to someone like Diamond, it kind of happens twice. It happens when they suffer it, and then it happens again when they say, hey, look, this happened, when they stand up and they speak up and say, this is bullshit. Because then they get the, well, why is she doing this? What's she doing? People start impugning the motives. People start calling into question, or they say, well, what about that time, you said this? It's just, it must be exhausting. It's just grotesquely unfair. And again, to anyone who's gone through this, and there are way too many, all we can say is, God damn it, we all have to do a lot better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you're in a position anywhere and you see someone behaving like this, to anyone, step in, stand up. Like there is no excuse for this kind of. There was no excuse for this kind of behavior 50 years ago. Like there's no excuse today. I'm so sad for Diamond and other young women in the party. Well, women in the party just in general, that they have to face this. And that's why I think I wanted tougher action from Falcon right out of the chute. They're investigating it. I'm not sure. It seems weird to me, and this was a point Mike Smith brought up on a radio interview this morning. It seems weird to me that you're going to have your campaign lawyer interview someone from a different campaign team about this. You've already decided that there's enough truth there to fire one person. Finish the job. I don't know who these people are who are involved. Look, Kevin has a wife. Kevin has 2 daughters. Kevin has a sister-in-law who's in politics. Like, these folks understand politics, and
he wants to lead a party that presumably wants to attract qualified women candidates of the caliber of Diamond Eisinger.
Exactly. His campaign is chaired by Diane Watts and Puneet Sandhu. Like, it's time to completely disavow those people. Send them out. Like, you can't. How can you look them in the eye and trust their judgment on anything when they're acting like this? So I think they need to go as quickly as possible. And again, mean, Diamond is much more gracious than I would be. I would name names, and I would, but I guess part of that is probably, sadly, I haven't experienced this kind of abuse the way she has. So unfortunately, she has more experience with it, and that's tremendously sad and disturbing, and something we got to change.
Yeah, no, and the dismally sad, it's not even irony of all this, is that I mentioned off the top that Diamond started a Tumblr account, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, detailing sexist remarks made about female premiers, and the sad, bitter irony is that now she's being subjected to some of the, not only have things not got better, she is being herself subjected to many of these same awful sexist remarks. I mean, if that isn't damning of the culture in general, I don't know what is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We've talked about this for so long. Premier Clark talked about it, and Rachel Notley, and then from across political spectrum, and Sarah Elder, and like we've talked about these issues for so long, and they're still there, and it's disgusting and mind-boggling that people act like this. So, the thing now is you see it happen, speak out immediately and stop it.
Yep.
And embarrass the person who's being the bully and the misogynist, and trust that folks will back you up on it.
Yeah. And it's really, really important to stop it when it's somebody on the other side, because the rationale it's given so many times is that, well, of course we oppose sexism, but like with Catherine McKenna, that's justified because she's awful, or Michelle Rampel-Garner, or Rachel Notley, or Christy Clark. It doesn't matter. Lisa Helps, our mayor here in Victoria. It's just, it's always wrong. You can there's plenty of room to disagree with them and say, I think they're really wrong about this, and well, pretty much everything, but you still don't have to go there.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It is, it's a disturbing trend, and one we got to stop. And it's not just women in politics. I mean, women in broadcast media. Jody Vance will tell you, look at the abuse that Jody gets for being as outrageous as supporting vaccine mandates. This is not an issue that
I shouldn't laugh, but you're right.
I know, but this is Jody's Jody takes I do not get that kind of abuse online that Jody does. No. Now, I don't have the same profile and portfolio as and I'm not on CKNW Weekly and all that, but I was at one point, and there were some nasty things said about me, but nothing like a woman in politics faces, or women in broadcasting. Yeah. So we got to do better. Guys, we got to do better. Enough. Let's be better.
The line is drawn in the sand, guys. Yeah. Let's be on the right side of this one. Moving on to more standard BC politics matters.
Should we, before we move off Liberal leadership, should we talk? Aaron Gunn's got an announcement coming up.
Oh, well, I didn't know. Yes.
Aaron Gunn has an announcement coming up this weekend. I don't know what it's about. My bet would be forming his own party, something, who knows.
I'll be honest here, listeners and watchers, this is the first time hearing this. What, did he drop any hints?
You're not following Aaron Gunn on social media?
Well, I missed it.
So I forget where. He's got another event coming up, and he'll have a monumental announcement. Maybe it'll be an exploratory committee to discuss a new party. Who knows? But no, listen. I'm not sure what's happening there. I do think that this week the BC Liberal leadership race is in flux. I'm not sure. The only story that anyone's seen about the BC Liberal leadership race in the past month, or the only two stories, are Diamond Eisinger and Aaron Gunn being disallowed. I do not think either of those stories are particularly good for the Kevin Falcon campaign. And so I do wonder, again, Alice Ross out there saying the right things, doing the right things. I wonder. we don't have any polling. We don't know who's signing up members. It's almost impossible to tell. But if I were betting on this, I might be more inclined to put a few more dollars down on Alice.
Well, what are the conceivable options that Aaron Gunn could be announcing this weekend? I mean, yes, something about forming a new party, joining the BC Conservatives, I guess. Yeah. Could he conceivably be mulling legal action that I don't think it would be warranted? But
legal action, maybe he'll come out and announce support for Alice Ross.
That's actually.
The thing that would be the hardest to do as a 31-year-old young man with a big social media following is probably the right thing to do long term. And that's to come out and say, listen, there's one guy in this race who stood up for me and said I should be in it. And I'm going to, encourage my supporters to do everything I can to make Ellis Ross the next leader of the BC Liberal Party and, start building that coalition. Because it's very clear that, Aaron and Ellis see the world in similar ways, that they've worked together in the past on videos. Ellis came out and supported his candidacy. There's something there. So that is, why would you right now go out there and take over the BC Conservatives and then find yourself facing off against an Ellis Ross-led BC Liberal Party? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, that would be my advice, is like, get behind Ellis, put him over the top, and then fire all those people who wouldn't let you run, and, pick your nomination and be, the social media guy that kind of turns around that party and helps brand it with Ellis's, common sense, common tongue, straight talking, conservatism. Like, to me, that makes sense. But it's easy to say when, I'm sitting here behind a camera in my nice office, and it's a lot harder when it's your blood boiling and you feel wronged and you feel ashamed in front of your supporters, and you've got folks saying, we hate Liberals anyways, burn it all down. Yeah. But that would be my advice, is like, get behind Ellis, make him the leader, and then you're essentially the presumptive next in line. Like,
so in other words, if I may interpret what you're saying, is this week we will discover if Aaron Gunn has the temperament to play the long game, if he's in it for the long haul, or if he wants to go out in a blaze of glory, like the Earl of Essex, a classic reference for you, those of you who enjoy Renaissance history. Yeah, I know, I did it. I can't help myself. Anyway,
I thought Bon Jovi sang "Blaze of Glory."
He did. Well, yes. Yes. So like Jon Bon Jovi. Jon Bon Jovi? That's him.
That's right.
The guy who owned the arena football team. Yeah. That's the only reason.
In grade five, my best friend, Eric Consadori, dressed up as Jon Bon Jovi, which was a extremely difficult thing for my very Christian conservative mother to allow. First of all, allow me to go trick-or-treating, number one. And number two, to go out trick-or-treating with a Jon Bon Jovi kid. But Mom sucked it up. And I can say that I've not suffered too badly from that experience.
Was Bon Jovi particularly controversial? I'm trying to remember. This was
like the mid '80s, like crazy hair, talking about treatment of women. It was that era Bon Jovi, and again,
fair enough.
Again, conservative Christian family, right?
Fair enough. I mean, I know.
I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man, for Pete's sake. That's how conservative we were as a family. So,
wow. Yeah. I was gonna say, I once heard a teacher in one of my schools accuse someone of being a Satanist because they listened to the Beastie Boys. Beast.
Well, that's.
It was a different time, guys.
Yeah. Case closed.
Moving on. This week, today is Tuesday, we're recording, and this was the second consecutive day that question period was devoted nearly to, the bulk of question period both days was devoted to a single topic, and that was autism funding. The NDP has announced they plan to phase out direct funding to families with someone who is autistic, I think by 2025. This has, you might think, understandably, caused a lot of distress and worry in that community. And that's, I think, usually in these issues, the best approach for an opposition is not to stand up and say, we think this is wrong, but to say, look, I'm quoting this family who is terrified. And that's what they've done. 2 days of this. Doesn't look like the NDP plans to change tack. It is still somewhat novel and odd, Jordan, to see a BC Liberal opposition attack an NDP government on lack of funding on a social issue, because you can tell that this actually flummoxes the NDP a little more. I think these ones hit home a little more uncomfortably than some economic ones do.
Yeah, well, this is the kind of issue that opposition NDP would have dined out on for months.
Oh yeah,
and the clawback is a great example of that phenomenon. Two things are happening here. First of all, three things. Number one, the minister claims that, we've had lots of great consultation with autism parents in Autism BC. Turns out that was all done pre-COVID. Maclean, I barely remember the world pre-COVID. I'm told that a world existed, but it was so long ago now that I don't know how you could take that and say that it has any relevance to what families are facing today. What this really is it's about ideology. This is NDP government believes that the solution for almost every problem is government, a government program, a government idea, a government staffer, a government whatever. Parents of children with autism might be some of the most incredibly motivated self-advocates. So, and it's not all, you can't talk with a broad brush about every parent of a child with autism, but generally speaking, they are very strong advocates because they've had to be. They've had to advocate with their school districts to get funding. They've had to advocate to get extra funding from government and medical presumptions, and they can advocate and get a tax break to help them pay for things to help their kids. They have to advocate to get the diagnosis. Like it is a long period of advocating for your child, and what you're trying to do is set them up for a future where they'll be successful. And you and I know that the love of a parent has for a child is like overwhelms everything else, your political views, everything. Like that is the single most important thing is the little person in front of you who you're responsible for. And the NDP, really against the brand that they've tried to cultivate for 25 or 30 or 50 years maybe, stuck their hand into this beehive and are shocked that they're being stung. Like these are very organized advocates who will work hard and make you miserable until you do what they really want, which is expand, give them more options and more control over how their kids are resourced, not less. So, when you believe that government can solve everything, but parents are like, no, listen, I've had to fight and scrap for every dollar I get to help my child. These parents have lived that experience. For the minister, it's theoretical. It's, a nice coffee with an executive director of an autism charity. It's, the Connects Autism Network. It's theoretical. For these people, it's their life and it's their child. And by God, you better listen to them. And I'm fascinated to see the NDP have stumbled into this. And I keep waiting for them to extricate themselves, but they don't seem to be willing to.
Yeah, I mean, government is often the collision of one cause, an issue among many, versus the single defining issue of a given family's day-to-day life. And so government often seems surprised when there's such strenuous pushback to something because, we're doing so many other good things. It doesn't matter. They don't care. Why would they? It's so your points about how, for parents that are concerned are, I think, very well taken.
Yeah, it feels heavy-handed. The fact that they haven't consulted properly or widely, like this is another little failure by the NDP, and they're starting to stack up. And we're still 3 years from an election, so but all of these things deteriorate your brand. The FOI thing, we have the handling of heat dome, opioid addiction, mental health app, like all these things are really starting to pull away from this idea that the NDP are, we're the party that cares about you. Are you? Because you don't seem to care about those parents who have children with autism. And my neighbor has a child with autism, and they've been telling me that you don't really care about them at all, and you don't really care about us knowing, the information. You'd rather keep everything secret. That really starts to damage a brand. And that's why I find this very, very odd. And I don't sense much empathy when the NDP talk about this issue either. Which again, I don't understand that. Like, this is a situation where empathy is called for, and listening and understanding, and trying to find solutions long term for these families, not just what you think is politically expedient or lines up better with your ideology.
Yeah, I mean, question period can be a trap in that respect, in that you mentioned the lack of empathy. That is, I'm sure, directed at the people asking the questions, who, the minister or her colleagues may hold in some contempt, because that is the nature of adversarial politics. But for the people the opposition are asking questions on behalf of, they will perceive that contempt as directed on them because it's their words being quoted. And so, yes, question period can be a trap in that respect. And it's always better for ministers to remember that while they may not take the opposition or whoever is asking the question seriously, or think they might have great temerity in bringing this up, given the record of da-da-da-da-da-da, it doesn't matter. If you're the person who has given your question to your MLA and said, please ask the minister this, and the minister responds with, how dare you ask me this question? Yep. They take that personally. Yep. Good lesson for current and future and aspiring ministers.
Yeah, it's the heat dome all over again, right? Oh well,
Yeah.
fatalities are just a part of life. Yeah, that's easy for you to say, pal, but you know, it was my grandma or my aunt or my uncle who, you know, died in that 595, I think is the count now that the
Yeah.
chief coroner Lisa Lapointe has come out with. And now you're starting to see the community by community breakdown. This is where it gets even more mind-boggling, right? Like in Langley in that weekend, 24 seniors died because directly related to the heat dome. In Langley, nice suburban community, pretty good facilities, lots of options. 24, and you know it's 23 in Chilliwack. It's 21 or something in Abbotsford. Like you start to think about like, hang on, 24 people died that weekend just in my little community. That's shocking. So
Yeah.
you know, and there's no sense that they have any grand plan to fix it or to go on or to make it better next time. You know, we get a Andrew Weaver approved climate plan, but really what we should be doing is figuring out how to keep these buildings cool if the heat dome is going to be something that recurs. I don't understand. I don't pretend to understand what the NDP are doing at this point because they seem to be cannibalizing their own brand on this.
Speaking of files that aren't going anywhere, the continuing kerfuffle over freedom of information is being debated at the committee stage this week. And I think the thing that we should talk about this week is not that this file has not evolved, because I mean, it's the NDP are going to do what they're going to do. But Murray Rankin is a minister in this government, and as an advisor to the previous NDP government, had actually helped bring in the current FOI laws, and even more to the point, had spoke strenuously against federal efforts by the Liberal Party to introduce a fee for FOI requests, calling it, you're cutting off access. Quite accurately, I think.
He called it.
Yeah, he has. So it has been only natural for the media to be curious what now NDP Minister Murray Rankin thinks about this the current government direction. I don't know the answer to that, and no one does because he hasn't spoken. This is kind of a separate issue from FOI in that we're in the year feels like year 19, month 19 of the pandemic era, and the press gallery and media in general have, I think, done a pretty good job arranging access for ministers and MLAs as much as possible. We were told at the beginning of all this, when the government was setting up access, especially for the ministers, that we in the media, as good or even better access to ministers on demand. And all we had to do was email and say, I want to talk to, in this case, Minister Murray Rankin about this. And that we would get, okay, at 3:00, there'll be a phone call or a Zoom. Great. For the most part, this has mostly happened. But we said at the time, the acid test would come when there's a scandal or an awkward issue and somebody doesn't want to talk about something, that'll be the test. And lo, that test, Jordan, has come. Murray Rankin has not answered or acknowledged this issue in any way, shape, or form. In days past, 2 years ago, we would have just camped outside the House and waited for him and said, Minister, you said this is happening, comment. And you can't run away from the camera. You can, however, dodge emailed interview requests.
Yeah, look, I think the press gallery is coming to a point where the gallery's going to have to make a decision. Do they break the rule in order to further openness and accountability from government? Listen, the FOI, we're into week 3 now of this issue. The NDP thought it would go away after one day. It has not. Vaughn Palmer wrote about it again. Specifically citing Murray Rankin. This will continue to be an issue until Rankin speaks. Rankin will speak, and then it'll continue to be an issue after that.
Yeah.
The coalition fighting this is grown by leaps and bounds and brought together very odd political bedfellows. But all of us rely on openness and fairness in government. So, look, I'm here for it. I'm here for holding this government to account for a tone-deaf, heavy-handed, ham-fisted attempt to hide from public accountability. I think journalists are doing the right thing by continuing to push it. And I think at some point, if Rankin doesn't speak by the end of this week, I guess next week you're off. So if he hasn't agreed to an interview by Thursday, I think it's perfectly within the press gallery's right to go camp out somewhere and get the interview that they need, because it's ridiculous that they're dodging it like this.
Well, and he's the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. I mean, he can't hide forever. Eventually, he's going to need to speak on something,
Yeah.
and we'll take questions because he's going to want to talk about whatever great announcement is coming from his ministry. And the first question is going to be, yeah, I don't care about that, Minister,
Yeah.
worthy though it may be. Let's talk about this. And then it's just going to get worse. Look, far be it from me to give, the NDP Premier's office political advice, but I'm kind of surprised that this was an own goal I didn't see coming. The way around this is to have make Murray Rankin available on day one, or have a line in the press release saying, "Look, things have changed. The situation has evolved in 20. I don't know, whatever phony reasoning you want to give. It doesn't matter. The point is, there would then be something on the record, and then he could say after the fact, "Well, I've already spoken on it. My reason is that it's changed for these. Things are different now, 20 years later, for whatever reason." Yeah. It wouldn't be great, but it'd be something. Instead, there's this vacuum, and media abhors a vacuum.
But what if, Maclean, and let me throw out an alternate scenario, what if Murray Rankin still believes what he believed 2 years ago? Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sure he does believe it.
And what if Murray Rankin is like, I get cabinet, we swear an oath of loyalty, blah, 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 we got to toe the party line. But what if he's like, I don't want to go out and talk on this one. I refuse.
It's possible.
Or he's kind of hinted to the Premier's office, like, listen, if they ask me, I'm going to answer honestly. Rankin is one of those few NDP MLAs, NDP cabinet ministers who I think would have the ability to... It would make the Jeff Meggs and John Horgans of the world pause if he said, I don't want, I disagree with this. And usually that's an automatic boot from cabinet. But, Murray Rankin, Adrian Dix... Farney. That might be the three. Like, even if Eby decide to disagree, they might boot Eby. Honestly, the three might be them. They may be the ones with the free pass, where they're so respected. Like, John Horgan went out and got Murray Rankin to run. Murray Rankin's a long-time NDP MP.
And a respected one.
And desperately needed on a file that, the last guy blundered badly for the NDP. So you don't have that same kind of, maybe he's a little bit able to be freer with it, right? Like, there were times in the Campbell cabinet where cabinet ministers gently disagreed, or a free vote was called, or whatever. These things do happen from time to time. So I do wonder if that is, maybe Murray Rankin, by not saying anything, is saying a lot.
Yeah, well, you bring up a really good point. That might make sense, because you're right. The people in the NDP Premier's office are smart. I would think they would have seen this coming, but I mean, either they didn't see it coming, or they did, and something like you described happened, where Murray Rankin just said, "I'm not comfortable with that," and if it's going to be like that, then I'd rather just say nothing. But I do think that they underestimated the intense media interest in this file, which is still hard to understand, but. Until he says something, it's not going anywhere.
Has he been in the House for the votes on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely he has. He's read statements in that, and I don't believe he's answered questions this week or last week. I could be wrong about that, but he's definitely been around. I saw him myself.
Right, but you're not allowed to ask questions on legislation.
No, and to clarify, if you're listening and watching this, that's one of the COVID provisions. As in years past, in the before times, media could sit outside the chamber and approach any MLA or minister and literally just start asking questions. And they might say something like, well, I can't right now, but I'll meet you in 15 minutes. That was not unusual. Right. But rarely would they just skate. Mm-hmm. And if they did, it would be for 24 hours at best, because once you start running away from the cameras, that's even worse. That is the one thing that is the biggest difference in the COVID era, is like the in-person scrums, and you might argue understandably, are still prohibited. But we were promised that we would have access to more or less whoever we asked for, and that unfortunately has not happened with Murray Rankin.
Well, don't hold your breath.
No. Well, at this point, yeah, if it was going to happen, it would have been days ago. The longer it goes, the worse it gets.
They're going to force a confrontation, right? And I know not everyone in the press gallery is comfortable with the idea, but I do think that in an environment where you're all double vaxxed, this isn't just a minor issue to me. This is a meat and potatoes, this affects how we do our job issue.
Yeah.
And, this person, the person I'm surprised is, every time Vaughn writes about it, he specifically cites Murray Rankin. And I think there's maybe a personal disappointment there from Vaughn that this is how this went.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and he was such an outspoken advocate about government going in exactly the opposite direction that it's just such a natural and obvious question.
Do you think any government ever, like, let's say there is a $25 fee, is it there forever, or do you think, I mean, the BC Liberals, they go in and, like, what's the incentive for any government ever to change it?
That's the thing. That's the problem. Yeah, is once it's there and once it's accepted. I mean, they could go in, and the really nefarious thing to do would be to reduce it by half, which is still too much, and say, well, hey, look, we're champions. We cut the fee in half.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I would like to think that some high-minded government or successor or someone, perhaps even John Horgan himself, would say, yeah, we've come to our senses and this is bad policy. But once government starts charging for things, they rarely stop, as you probably know only too well from your Canadian Taxpayers Federation days.
Yeah, I think back to government advertising. Remember the Clark campaign, the Clark government took a lot of heat for just millions and millions of dollars worth of provincial advertising before campaign periods. Mm-hmm. And the NDP swore they would come in and they would bring in a law where the Auditor General, or I think the Auditor General, would look at ads ahead of time like Ontario does and make sure that they are actually necessary during this period. Statutory ads, they were called. Make sure they didn't have the branding of any political parties. And then the NDP got elected and did nothing on that file except tons and tons of government-paid advertising in order to prop up their own re-election bid. So, yeah, it's hard not to be cynical about this stuff sometimes, Maclean. I'm trying not to be cynical, but it's hard not to be when you see it over and over again.
Man, I start and end every show with happy politics, but this is we're both the first and last issue here it's hard not to be cynical.
It is. What did your little one dress up as for Halloween, by the way?
He was a dragon, a specific dragon from Pokemon, which he is obsessed with, called Mega Charizard X, and I have to get that right or I will get in big trouble. Yes. And it was a completely made in-house costume. My wife is an absolute magician when it comes to these things. And what about yours? Did they dress up?
Yeah, my 11-year-old was a sloth. The hilarious thing is he went trick-or-treating with one of his best friends who was wearing one of those, like outside car dealerships, you have like the dancing man thing.
Waving inflatable arm, yeah.
Totally, but it was great because he was like neon orange and could be seen for miles. So we felt very safe. Also, he couldn't hear well, he couldn't run fast, it was great. So they went out together, and then my 14-year-old went to a party. She was Batgirl, which always makes me happy. Although, pardon me, let me rephrase. She was Batman. And she wants that clear. She was Batman, not Batgirl.
Not Batgirl.
Even though she was wearing Batgirl's boots. I don't know what's going on. But just whatever.
Batman's outfit has evolved so much over the years. I mean, that's fine.
It's true. So I've also, for Halloween as a child, was Batman, probably more than once. So
as was I. I did. I think we've all been Batman at least once, every night in our dreams.
That's right. Exactly. So anyways, it was good. We had a lot of kids this year. We had about more than 100 come by the house in Wallgrove. Last year we had about 35, but it was COVID. 2 years ago we had 60-ish. So Halloween's back, baby.
I like it. I'm pro Halloween.
Yeah.
I got into trouble this week for saying I like Halloween fireworks and was told that I hate dogs and veterans and Twitter, man. It's a terrible place.
Yeah, I'm not as bothered by it. My dog isn't as bothered, but I feel like it's a little bit like an issue like time change. I'm really pro stopping time change until my kids are old enough that it doesn't matter anymore, and then I'm like, whatever. But if you're in the, I know this is like Richard Zussman's number one issue, but he's in a house where he's got kids that, that affects. And someday they'll grow out of it, and then time change will become less of an issue.
Yeah, well, I'm also pro leaving time change behind us, but I mean, it's not something I'm going to call anyone a bad name on Twitter over. No. Reasonable people can disagree.
The Alberta vote on that was like almost dead even within a few hundred votes. Crazy.
Yeah, 50.1 to 49.9, which is, I mean... almost mathematically impossible. Fascinating stuff, actually.
Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. All right. Until next week, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K. Happy politics.